As 2025 drew to a close, the United States under President Donald Trump bore the unmistakable imprint of a year defined by upheaval and relentless transformation. Returning to the White House with a unified Republican Congress, Trump shaping and reshaping governance through a flood of executive orders that reasserted America First priorities at home and abroad. Domestically, his administration dismantled regular frameworks, tightened immigration enforcement, and ignited fierce debates over civil liberties and federal power, while critiques decried what many saw as democratic erosion. Internationally, Trump's foreign policy veered from long-standing alliances to bold unilateralism, from a sweeping new national security strategy to prioritize sovereignty and migration control to aggressive actions in the Western Hemisphere and rebranding under U.S. influence under a contemporary doctrine. As the year ended, his leadership left global balances unsettled and America's political landscape deeply polarized, setting the stage for 2026. Stay with us.
Donald Trump is his name, he's there to stay.
As unlikely, impossible is now reality.
We will make America powerful. We will win, win, win. And we will make America great again. Let's do what our own carries. We will very quickly make America great again.
In 2025, President Donald Trump's foreign policy took a dramatic turn in the Western Hemisphere with what pundits have called the doctrine, a modern twist on the 19th century doctrine. What once seemed like rhetorical flourish has become a defining strategy, reasserting U.S. dominance across the Americas and reshaping regional politics. U.S. military presence surged near Venezuela, and Washington openly backed selected candidates while sanctioning left-wing governments, tying foreign influence closely to Trump's vision of power and security. From bold military moves to political interventions, his doctrine blends nationalists' ambition with traditional hemispheric control, aiming to curb rival powers and alleviate U.S. influence. Whether hailed as strategically recalibration or critique as co-reverse policy, it marked one of Trump's most consequential foreign policy shifts of the year.
Stop sending drugs into the United States. We knocked off actually 3 boats, not 2, but you saw 2. And the problem is there are very few boats out in the water. There are not a lot of boats out in the water. I can't imagine why.
2025 opened on a different rhythm. With Donald Trump back in the White House, America realigned its power, its alliances, and its priorities. From Gaza to Ukraine, from China to borders at home, Washington chose transactions over traditions, testing whether a narrower, tougher America can still shape a fractured world.
2025 did not begin quietly. It opened with a reset, a redefinition of how the United States sees power, alliances, and its place in a fragmented world. With President Donald Trump back in the White House, foreign policy pivoted fast away from expansive commitments and towards what the administration calls core national interests. The new national security strategy narrowed America's priorities, emphasizing sovereignty, economic power, and strategic dominance over ideological leadership. Under Trump, diplomacy became transactional, partnerships measured by cost, benefit, and leverage, not shared values or long-term obligations. The war in Gaza became a defining test, putting the United States into an intense mediation effort amid mounting humanitarian and political pressure. Washington pressed partners quietly and publicly, seeking compliance, restraint, and alignment with U.S. crisis management plans. Washington demanded Europe carry more of the burden on Ukraine, aid, reconstruction, and security, exposing growing transatlantic strain. The Trump administration framed Ukraine talks as a way to cap the war, contain Russia, and refocus U.S. power elsewhere, especially towards China. Despite diplomatic engagement and trade talks, China remained America's primary strategic competitor, economically, technologically, and militarily. Economic statecraft became a frontline weapon. Sanctions, frozen assets, tariffs, and industrial policy used to project power without troops. Immigration limits, trade restrictions, and supply chain protections reinforced the familiar message. America First was no longer a slogan. It has become a policy. As of 2025 closed, one question lingered. Can a transactional America shape a chaotic world, or will the cost of disengagement surface later?
As 2025 closes, America stands reshaped, more selective, more transitional, and more internal focused. Under Donald Trump, power was measured in leverage, not promises. From Gaza to Ukraine, from Beijing to America's borders, and the reset is clear. What remains is uncertain is whether this strategy secures stability or immediately postpones its costs. For more analysis, we're joined by Mark Toth, National Security and Foreign Policy expert from Washington, and from LOA, Newman Abu Isa, a political analyst on U.S. policy. Welcome and a very warm welcome to our program, and a very happy New Year. Welcome, Mr. Toth. How did Trump's America First 2.0 doctrine in 2025 alter traditional U.S. alliances, especially with NATO in the United States?
Greetings to you. Happy New Year to you and your viewers. I think it remains to be determined. In theory, it sounds like there is a new Trump administration doctrine here, the Monroe Doctrine, the corollary, as he calls it, in South America with respect to Venezuela in particular at this point. The problem that we're seeing, however, is that Trump himself is so transactional that it's difficult to see policy carry through over to these new national security stratagems that his team put forth. So while we're emphasizing the Western Hemisphere, it's just not clear that what Trump's intentions are in it. Much of it seems to be centric around the E and a word that we call dime here, which is the way that you wield instruments of U.S. national power, D for diplomacy, I for information, M for military, and E for economic. And it seems like that the economic angle of it is what wields Trump's policy in terms of him wanting to be transactional in each region of the world that he deals with. So from my standpoint, in terms of what we've seen so far, what we're likely to see going forward into 2026 is, I think the E is still going to trump a lot, no pun intended, but the E is going to trump a lot of the other aspects of national power and even his other goals, which is going to make it difficult for everyone to see, analyze what exactly is he after. I think he's after business deals.
Mr. Abu Isa, did Trump's claims of nearing peace deals from Ukraine to the Middle East translate into real leverage, or were they largely only rhetorical, sir?
Yes, and Happy New Year to you, your guest, and your audience. We are glad that this year is getting to a close end. Lots of surprises and lots of shifts in this year, with the president starting this year saying that he wants to finish the Ukraine war on day one, and he wants also to finish the Gaza-Israeli genocide also early in his presidency. However, none of these objectives are met, and it's obvious now that the president has failed in Ukraine after meeting with the Russian president and rolling the red carpet for him, trying to reach an agreement to end the Ukraine war, and then Russia is gaining strength and not agreeing to the terms of the President Trump or Ukraine, and they are demanding their own terms to end this war, and those terms are not acceptable so far to the Ukraine and to Europeans. However, he made some improvements in the Gaza file, but this Gaza file is very complicated, and it is a decade-old file, and he has finished the genocide, but then the war is not done yet, and all the actors are trying to jockey for a role and try to bring more human aid to the Palestinians as they suffer through this
Mr.
winter
Abu
here.
Isa, Trump claimed that he ended 8 wars during his year of presidency. How do you read this from your own narrative and your own opinion, and how do you define this? And you were just mentioning at the end of your answer the Gaza, and we're still in the Gaza, and we're still in South Lebanon, and we're still in Venezuela, and we're still in Iran, and we're still all around.
Yeah, I agree with your guess that the president wants more agreements, economic agreements, and deals with different countries for the American companies. However, some of those wars are continuing, and he is submitting to Netanyahu's the wants of more wars, especially with Iran, as we can see from Netanyahu multiple visits to the United States and meeting with him many times in this last year, and now Netanyahu is trying to start a new war with Iran, and we'll see if that's going to happen or not. But this happened at his watch. The United States did fight with Iran, and they came to an agreement for the 12-day war. And there was many other involvements with Venezuela. For example, he's trying to pick up a war there as well, and trying to get all the ships close to the Caribbean Sea and to put pressure on Venezuela. And he did have marginal roles in some of those conflicts, but then he likes to exaggerate. And that's President Trump. At this second term of his, he's been able to dominate the Republican Party, and he has no opposition in the American government. The Democrats are minority in this government, and the Republicans have submitted to him and to his policies, and he's doing what he pleases, and he also says what he pleases. So he likes to exaggerate, and that's what we see all the time.
Mr. Toth, how do you read the situation, if you heard my question?
Yeah, no, I think really what we're seeing here is that you have a theory of how Trump wants to carry forward U.S. national security and foreign policy, as articulated in the national security strategy that you referenced at the top of the program. The problem is his actions don't back that up in key areas. It does in the economic side of it, but what we're seeing here repeatedly across these different...
Sorry, sir, to interrupt at this point, but you are saying he is focusing more, or do you mean to say, or do you interpret what you said interprets, that Trump is more keen on the economic side and trade deals than he is on what's happening all over the globe?
Yeah, no, it's complicated because, look, he is clearly, from a negotiating standpoint, because he's so transactional, he focuses on the economic side, but he still did put forth this theory of what he wanted U.S. foreign policy to be. The problem is, in chasing those economics, he's created a lot of vacuums in these areas that he claims to have solved. For instance, in Iran, he says that he obliterated that nuclear weapons program, the ballistic missile program implied as well. Yet Iran is now threatening to reconstitute it. They just tested new missiles. They're even talking about putting unconventional warheads on them, including mustard gas. So there's that vacuum. There's the vacuum in Gaza that we've not yet gotten to phase 2 yet, in terms of establishing an international stabilization force, making sure that there's a technocratic committee that's put in place to run Gaza to start rebuilding it. Those things are difficult and still need to be addressed. And then you have obviously this 12/31 deadline today in Lebanon with respect to Hezbollah withdrawing to the north of the Litani River or the Blue Line, whichever you prefer, and disarming. And that is another vacuum that's there. And then, as your guest rightly pointed out, there's the vacuum in Ukraine that's gone nowhere. He's bent over backwards to try to appease Putin, but it's not worked. At this point, Russia maintains its maximalist views on how to solve that conflict, and Ukraine is hanging on, if you will. They're not losing, but they're not winning.
Mr.
So
Todd
it's kind of
and Mr.
Groundhog Day for
Abuaisa,
them.
we're going to continue together this program. It's not yet off. But before we leave and go to a report, I just want to make sure that you're both on the same ground and you both see that what Donald Trump is doing is what pleases Donald Trump, not what the entire globe wants at this point. And for his own sake and for his own interests, the United States. And now we are still continuing our discussion with our esteemed guests. But for now, let's take a close look at Trump's return to the White House. His first year back was marked by bold policy moves and a rapid consolidation over power, reshaping immigration, policing, taxes, climate policy, and even the language of war. Here's how the domestic in 2025 unfolded.
On his first day back in office, Trump granted clemency to more than 1,500 people charged in the January 6th Capitol riot and created the Department of Government Efficiency,
Doge. Perhaps you've heard of it.
triggering a sweeping federal hiring freeze. On immigration, the administration moved to end birthright citizenship by executive order.
Ending birthright citizenship, which now comes to the fore. That was meant for the babies of slaves.
And issued new immigration and customs enforcement guidance, ICE, allowing arrests at schools and hospitals. By summer, attention shifted to domestic order. In June, the National Guard was deployed to Los Angeles, followed by a declaration of a crime emergency in Washington, D.C. in August.
Well, this was a big one, wasn't it?
The legislative centerpiece of the year, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, was signed into law. The sweeping package cut corporate tax rates, redirected federal funding away from initiatives to reduce fossil fuel use, and reshaped major safety net programs. It tightened work requirements and increased safety cost sharing for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, and included major reduction to Medicaid, estimated at roughly $1 trillion over 10 years. Climate policy saw a sharp reversal. The Trump administration again exited the Paris Agreement.
The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord,
Froze billions of dollars from the Inflation Reduction Act, and barred federal agencies from using terms such as climate change and decarbonization. Military posture and branding also shifted. Trump authorized the Pentagon to use the secondary title, the Department of War, for ceremonial and internal purposes, and expanded operations against drug cartels in the Caribbean. At the White House, construction began on a new East Wing ballroom funded by private donors. Together, these policies have defined the first year of Trump's second term, prompting legal challenges, protests, and renewed debate over executive power, civil liberties, and national priorities.
Welcome back, our distinguished guests, and thanks for staying with us. And I hope you heard the report. Mr. Toth, how would you summarize the key domestic priorities of Trump's first year back in office?
Yeah, just a quick qualifier. I'm a national security and foreign policy analyst, so I really don't focus day to day on his domestic policies. But clearly, just broadly speaking here, He has pursued what he calls an America First agenda, both in his foreign policy and his domestic policy. For him, that means broadly, as evidenced by the big, beautiful bill, he wants a return of core manufacturing to the United States, which is what that calls for. That's why you're seeing all of these tariffs being imposed upon other countries, which is not so much to generate revenue from abroad, but eventually to generate revenue from inside of the U.S. By incenting manufacturing companies here to start up production again in certain areas. The problem is there's costs that come with that, potentially inflationary costs. For now, he's avoided that. Inflation remains under control. There's some leverage that the Federal Reserve has. I'm sorry, I'm speaking as a former economist here, but there's some leverage that the Federal Reserve still has in terms of the key interest rates of capping and controlling inflation. But there's always the potential that that might spiral out of control. In terms of trying to address some of the domestic agenda that he ran on, for instance, cutting fentanyl, et cetera, that's part of the cosmetics of what you're seeing happening in Venezuela. However, most of that fentanyl is not coming from there. It's actually coming from China in different means. And so if he's going to do that,
Okay,
he's
Mr.
going to
Todd,
figure out a
during the
different
last
way.
quarter of the year, the United States government experienced its longest shutdown, lasting 43 days, cutting up to $14 billion in GDP and shaving 2 points off late year growth. How do you read this from your own point of view, and how was it expected by the citizens of America and the United States from their president?
Yeah, I think in general, it's a good question. In general, Americans don't like shutdowns. They want their government open, providing services, et cetera, to them. So from that standpoint, not a good thing. And I think it's part of the reason why you've seen some of the president's poll numbers come down. In terms of the overall impact to GDP, time will tell, right? We just don't know what the overlasting impacts of that shutdown are versus what the tariffs might be. I think there's a big question mark there. Personally, I think the tariffs are still going to be problematic. They may work
sir, are
in the
you
long
okay
run.
with it?
No, that's not my position to take. Like I said, I'm a national security and foreign policy analyst. I don't do domestic U.S. politics. I'm just trying to say, from an analytical standpoint, having been an economist, the question you want answered is just, it's too soon to know. I suspect it won't work in the long run, but time will tell.
Okay, Mr. Abu Isa, the one big beautiful bill act reshaped taxes, social safety nets, and fossil fuel policy. How significant are these changes for Americans relying on federal programs?
Yes, the United States government is running a deficit, a large deficit for that matter, and the president is trying to cut at that deficit. However, he's trying to cut at the benefits for the poor people, and blaming Democrats for all the ills of this country. And then we see that those are not making major changes for the rich people. The gap between the rich and the poor is growing in the United States, and that is obvious, and that is mobilizing the base, the poor people, to vote more Democrats, like we've seen in 2025 from New York to other places in the country. So the people are not happy. The approval rating for the president are at 37%. He got most of the Republican vote and very little of Democrats, but then the swing votes in this country are the independents, and those are approving the president's policies at 25%, most recent poll. And that is very low, which speaks that there will be a change in policy, and Democrats might be winning more seats in the next year and the elections next year, and that will change also the dynamic of this country. The president has a free reign after his first term when there was some guards on him, but the second term he took upon himself to blame Biden for all the ills, and he concentrated on what his electorate wants. He knows that the many white people in the United States are upset with the immigration policy policies, and they don't want more immigrants coming legally or illegally for that matter. And he put lots of stops for the illegal immigration, and he's trying also to change the legal immigration as well. He stopped the visa for the people who come here to work, and he imposed $100,000 for those people, which can hurt American industry. So he is working.
Mr. Norman, do you see that in 2025 Donald Trump drew to a close economics and geopolitical, which became inseparable, and reshaping trade, energy, and global power while setting the stage for a volatile 2026?
Absolutely. I think he's looking short-term gains for the United States, and he's not strategic in his policies, and he's cutting our relationship with our allies across the globe, and he is also not developing the industries like he wants to develop in this country by putting tariff on the products from other countries. It takes a long time to develop those products in this country, and this country is known for its advancement in technology, and he did not advance the technology. I mean, China is gaining ground on that front, and he also stopped all the incentives for alternative energy in this country, and he's picking up wars, I guess.
Mr. Norman Abu Isa, of course, when we come to discuss the United States of America, on top of all the U.S. administration headed by Donald Trump, we have a lot to say. It's been a year that we've seen a lot, and we have to talk about a lot, and there are lots of files that we have to talk about. But that was Mark Toth, national security and foreign policy expert, and Mr. Nouman Abu Isa, political analyst on U.S. policy. Thank you for sharing your insights and expertise with us today. From all of us here in Qnews, we wish you a happy, healthy, and prosperous new year. May 2026 bring you success, peace, and new opportunities. As Donald Trump returned to the White House for a second term, his approach to national security took a sharp turn from his first.
Treat the word impossible as nothing more than motivation. Never quit. Never quit. Adversity makes you strong. Don't give in. Don't back down.
If Donald Trump's first term was unpredictable, his second has been even wilder. His first move was wiping out 78 Biden-era executive orders. Since returning to the White House, Trump has signed 221 executive orders, more than during his entire first term. Those orders touch nearly every corner of government, from immigration to defense and foreign policy. Many are now facing legal challenges, including a Supreme Court case over Trump's global tariffs, raising new questions about how far presidential power can reach. This term's defining document is a new national security strategy, marking a sharp shift in how Washington approaches the world. Unlike Trump's 2017 strategy, which focused on competition with China and Russia, the new document softens that approach. China is framed as an economic rival to manage, while Russia is no longer explicitly named an adversary. Instead, the sharpest criticism is aimed at Europe. The strategy accuses European governments of losing national identity, suppressing political opposition, and failing to do enough for their own security, signaling rising tensions across the Atlantic. Closer to home, the Western Hemisphere is now the top priority. Venezuela is signaled out as a destabilizing force, with Trump signaling tougher pressure on Caracas and a revived Monroe Doctrine-style approach to Latin America. On the global stage, Trump has branded himself the President of Peace, claiming credit for settling 8 conflicts. He points to diplomatic efforts during the Gaza war, pushing for ceasefires while backing Israel. Critics say results remain fragile. In Ukraine, the strategy prioritizes ending the war over confronting Moscow, opposes NATO expansion, and presses Kiev for territorial compromise. Not a repeat for his first term. Trump's second is faster, fiercer, and a sharper take on America first.
That's our look back at how Donald Trump's return to the White House influenced the world in 2025. From all of us here, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Coming up next, global elections and shifting powers played a major role in shaping 2025. Stay with us.